Congrats on the film. I really enjoyed it, and I wanted to ask you about the early portions of this film because those early scenes with Ben and his child and his wife are so important to understanding his motivations. We don't get a ton of time with them, but they manage to have an impact. And your films always have a surprising amount of heart to them, even when they're subverting genres and expectations. So, can you speak to your approach for that first act and really establishing that bond between those characters?
Yeah, it was actually some of the first scenes that we shot and some of the hardest scenes to do because we made the decision to use real babies, which makes it feel hopefully feel more real. I really don't want to go down the route of like CGI babies or dummies, but like having like two-year olds kind of like on set, like and sort of Jamie and Glenn sort of acting around there crying, was quite a kind of tall order to it was one of the most difficult scenes I think I've done in my career. As difficult in its own way as some of the later action scenes. But I think the other thing that we really wanted you to feel in the opening scenes of the movie, like the first three scenes in the movie, before the opening credits, is to feel kind of how claustrophobic the world is and that you're in these windowless rooms, like first in the kind of the factory office, then in this like lobby, then in their apartment, they're in this co-op where there's no kind of like windows to the outside. And so, it just shows the existence that the majority of the population on the wrong side of the wealth gap are living in, and that they're basically, pulling down like either doing more than one job or like pulling down double, or in Jamie's case, she's about to consider doing a triple shift, while she's got like a young sick child. Just the sort of you know, their place in the universe and how kind of like and how this isn't something that can keep happening, and also that that you establish that Ben's character is out of work because he's been blacklisted from if the same corporation like own everything and he's on the blacklist. It means that he can't legally work or like safely kind of work. So a lot of these things were in the book. The book starts with a very sort of claustrophobic scene that feels very desperate, and so we wanted to conjure the same kind of like image that that Ben, kind of has to feels like he has to put his boots on and make some money fast for the sake of his wife and child.
The Stephen King book was written in 1982, and yet
Actually,
so much of it.
published in 82, but written in 73, I found out during the
Oh,
festival
wow.
from the
That's
man
even
himself.
crazier because it feels like direct commentary on what we're living today. And for it to be 73, that's even more wild. Like some of the fake TV shows, I'm shocked that we don't have a guy like running in a hamster wheel doing trivia. Like that just seems like something we'd see on TV now. Like, was it weird how like on the nose some of this stuff was, even though it's from the book? Like it just seems incredibly timely.
I think there's two things. Is one is that Stephen King is like Nostradamus to have predicted all of this stuff, not just in this book, but other ones 50 years ago. But it's also an even more sobering thought is how little has changed in those decades. I think one of the things that we wanted to do with the movie is make it feel like it was sort of retro futuristic, as if it was an alternate 2025. If this is Stephen King's idea of 2025 is the year in which the book is set, um, that some of the things that you would have imagined then exist, and some technology has remained the same. So we kind of took this approach of like, well, if in the uptown everything has become more advanced, and then the downtown areas, like everything else has gone to shit, or like people are kind of using analog technology because it's cheaper, or because they can't afford like a smartphone, etc., etc. So it is in a way like sort of that, yes, the sort of, especially as it's released in the year in which it was set, and the the the, the fiction part of the science fiction is fainter than ever. But I think that was something that we really wanted to embrace, is showing that you can have a future dystopia that's only 5 minutes into the future.
And I love your leading man here, Glenn Powell, and listening to him speak about film, he seems to really understand storytelling, and you can see that he has ambitions. He's been doing some producing now. He co-wrote Hitman. What stood out about Glenn as a collaborator? Because he seems like someone that's really invested in learning about all the ins and outs of making movies rather than just acting.
I can the most ambitious part of this film um was sort of the schedule and just the intensity of it because we started filming just over a year ago and obviously Glenn is in every single scene and I honestly don't think I could have got through the movie without somebody as diligent and as hardworking as him because you know like the mood of the whole film trickles down from the number one person on the call sheet and I gotta say Glenn is like probably like the nicest most kind of responsible kind of actor you could ever hope to work with. And not just as an actor, he's brilliant, but he wasn't a producer on this film, but he has that. He also produced on other things, and he's written on other things. And actually, for me and Michael Bacall, having Glenn around as a collaborator, who's also a great writer as well, is really fantastic because he has really good ideas. And there are things in the movie that some of the things in the movie that were ideas of his that he sort of suggested something that me and MB would go right up. But like it was a great collaboration. I couldn't say enough nice things about him. He's like sort of like the best person that you could hope to work with on something like this.
Yeah, and he's great in this film as well. And Scott Pilgrim's one of my favorite movies, so it's so exciting to see you and Michael Cera together again. And his introduction to the film really gives it like this extra jolt before we go into the final stretch. How is it just leaning into Michael's strengths? Because people get excited when they see him. He adds an energy, and then those moments, it's like Home Alone on steroids. It's just an insane stretch. So how is it just leaning into using him and really ratcheting it up for that scene?
Well, I think it was that, that character is in the book and the action doesn't play out in exactly the same way, but it was something that was there right from the first draft. And then it actually developed a little bit, actually. One of the great script notes that we got during the development process from Mike Island, the sort of, then head of film at Paramount, like he said this thing because Bradley, Daniel Ezra's character, and Elton, Michael Cera's character, are both, people in the underground who help Ben. And Mike Island said, he said, one of these guys has got to fuck him over. And it was like a great note. And then we sort of decided we like, well, we don't want Elton to be a baddie. We don't want him to be kind of one of the baddies. But what if he was a massive liability? What if actually the thing that's the obstacle is actually like that, like the guy is, kind of not quite kind of like on planet Earth. And so when it came to the idea of like, well, if he's got this house booby trapped and ready to go, even if they had the chance to escape, his first thought is not like, let's get out of here. His first thought is like, I got to set up all my traps. Like, so it was a really fun kind of like energy to bring to that whole set piece because it's also there's a different version of it that if they were smart and sensible, they'd like get the fuck out of there, like and just like go. But no, it doesn't play out that way.
Yeah, it's so much fun. That was probably my favorite stretch of the film. And well, what's cool about this digital release and the home release is that there's a bunch of extra content, and you're still doing commentary tracks. I love that. I love
But did
that.
you have a chance to have a listen?
Yes, I loved
Oh yeah.
it. It's so great. You and Glenn, and um, can you just speak to your willingness of wanting to go into the art and speak on it? Because I feel like commentary tracks. I used to listen to like Shaun of the Dead's and Scott Pilgrim's repeatedly, and it always left me like feeling inspired and wanting to engage with the art. But they're becoming increasingly rare. So, what does it mean for you to get to open up and include them on this release?
Yeah, I mean, I've kept doing them. I think it's because people, like you just said, it's because responses like yours, people say that they really like them, and I think people would be really sad if there wasn't one. I also think as well, even before I did Shaun of the Dead, like film commentaries. I like film school to people. There are lots of people who can't afford to go to film school. You don't have the option to go to film school, and DVD commentaries can teach you a great deal. I always point to one when people say what's a particularly inspiring one. I always remember when I was about to make Shaun of the Dead, I listened to Robert Rodriguez's commentary for Desperado. And just in that 100 minutes, he gives you a pretty good outline of how to make, like an action movie. And it's fascinating. So I think these things are like artifacts, and we had really, I mean, actually, Glenn had never done a DVD commentary before the one that we did. Me and Michael McCall had done one before, but Glenn had never done one, so he was really excited to do one. I think they're important, and I would be sad if there was a day where like there wasn't the option to do one anymore.
I fully agree. Full cosign on that. And I thought it was interesting. We got two very faithful Richard Bachman adaptations this year, The Running Man and The Long Walk, but they both took a major zag with the endings, which makes sense. They're hard to film. So I was curious, like, did you ever consider using that original ending? I mean, it's interesting in this film because we kind of get a glimpse of it, and then there's the meta break from what we saw. So, what
Yeah,
was your thoughts on that?
we never we never intended to do the ending for the book, and I'd say there's obviously a real world parallel that happened after the book was published, which I think would make it in very poor taste to do the ending from the book, for I think very obvious reasons. So we knew right from the start, even before we started working on the treatment, that we weren't going to do that. And the idea was, well, what if we alluded to it in the sense of this is something that they're going to frame him for? Um, and really, I guess the without giving too much away about the ending of the book or the film, it was like to sort of we weren't gonna have the same fire, but what if we had the spark of the revolution, kept that? So that was the idea. It's something both kind of has still keeps the revenge element, but also kind of has a more like hopeful, like the start of a new movement. So that was really the idea. And to be honest, Stephen King, because he kind of has to sign off on the adaptation, he really liked the fact we changed it because I think he wasn't expecting us to do the ending from the book either, and actually was glad that we didn't. So it's funny sometimes. I think people say, "Why didn't you do the ending from the book?" And I was thinking, well, I think it's pretty obvious why we didn't, and I don't think that actually in 2025 to have something as bleak and nihilistic is maybe not what we need right now. I think we need like that crack of light, even if it's a very angry light.
Yeah, that was a very smart middle ground for sure. And this year was the 30th anniversary of A Fistful of Fingers, your debut Western movie. That was done on barely any budget, and now you're doing, something as big as The Running Man. So when you look back at that film and those early days, what are you most proud of?
I mean, to be honest, it's sort of amazing to me that the film happened at all. I think it's one of those things where it was completely powered along by this kind of youthful naivety in a way that I think if we'd have stopped to think, I mean, I'm not sure I ever did a second draft of the script. I think as soon as I'd filmed the movie and I was in editing, I did have this big existential crisis that I knew the movie wasn't good enough. And I suddenly felt when I was editing, I was like, what have I done? Why have I made this goofy movie as my debut? I mean, I actually feel better about it now looking back than maybe I did at the time. But that said, everybody worked on it really hard, and it was like this is a movie that cost 20 grand total, and it did open a lot of doors for me. I basically through that it did get released at the cinema in the UK, only on one screen, but it was still like actually reviewed and was released like at, like one cinema in London, and I got an agent out of it, and I started doing TV. So I have a lot to thank Fistful of Fingers for. Is it my least favorite of my filmography? Yes. Like, but is it like sort of a goofy movie made by a bunch of 20-year-olds? Yes. And if you could appreciate it as that, then great.
Yeah, it's fun to look back upon. You can see those little glimpses that, you would later perfect and do so well. So thank you so much for your time, Edgar, and congrats again on The Running Man. I really enjoyed it.